Welcome, everyone. This is the Abundant Investor Podcast, and we are Beth and Christine, your hosts. We are here to show you how you can live your rich life right now with the power of an abundance mindset and tools the wealthy have used for years that are accessible to the rest of us. Things like real estate investing and using the powerful benefits of life insurance. We're so glad you're here. Now let's dive in. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Abundant Investor. I'm one of your hosts, Christine Fiske. I'm here with my partner, Beth Rooney, and we are here today to shed some light on the economy and interest rates and the impact that it has on the housing market, both for the general housing market and also housing investments. So we've been having a really healthy conversation, Beth.
Yes.
And we are going to just continue that conversation with you because I think that this is something that we all get to hear and think about a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone's been sticking to the news and watching what's happening either on the news or listening to the radio, they know that there's a lot of fear right now. So that is the way of the news, right? And when it bleeds, it leads, we used to say, and now it's all about getting clicks. And so the things that psychologically drive us to click are the things that create fear for us, for better or worse. It is actually for worse. I really don't pay attention to the news.
Yeah.
Such a small part of the information I take in is the daily news as a result of that. So we thought it would be really helpful today to first start out addressing the interest rates because they are, for most people, some of the highest they remember in their lifetime. I know just looking back at the average income or the average interest rate back in the 80s, it's unbelievable to me to think about my parents purchasing a house when interest rates were in the range of 15%. And in the 80s, the early 80s and other times in history, that's where they were.
Mm-hmm.
And because we haven't seen anything like the 8.5% that we're seeing today, it is alarming to people. And I think it's got a lot of people paralyzed in fear, and living in fear, in my opinion, is no way to live. So let's talk about that. And the other ways that we can look at it and how we can actually see today's market as an opportunity instead of something that holds us back from creating the life that we really want to create and buying the house that we really want to live in and making the move. And with a specific focus on those folks that are maybe empty nesters, thinking about their next step once the kids are leaving or have left the house.
Absolutely. I think I really love what you were saying, Christine, about, the news and the fear. And, we're going to come into even more of that in 2024 because, of course, it's an election year. And if history tells us anything, we can see that as it relates to making real estate decisions, starting in about the mid-year of an election year, people just sit still and don't do anything. And you and I have talked about zigging when others zag on this podcast a lot. And I think that it's really timely as we're entering a new year and people are thinking about their goals and vision to think about really, how much you're going to allow things like interest rates and speculation about what direction they're going in, and the speculation about the election affect you and what's important to you and where you live and all those really other really good things, because at the end of the day, who the president is shouldn't have a massive impact on where you decide to live. It's, even if they made wide policy changes, it shouldn't affect you as much as people allow it to affect them. They get caught up in the news and they hear that people are sitting on the sidelines. So they think they should sit on the sidelines too. Mm-hmm. And I think we're here to say, let's question that a little bit.
Yeah, or a lot, because so often we're going with the flow and we're not thinking about what is it that really suits me and my family and aligns with the vision that I have for myself. And for example, if you're sitting in a house knowing that if the interest rates were a bit lower, you might be selling it and moving into a maybe a warmer climate, maybe the potential retirement location, and you're not sure, or maybe you know where you want to retire and where you want to live later, and you're not making a move right now because you're afraid that you're going to lose your 3% mortgage, and or maybe you don't even have a mortgage and you're going to jump into a home that's got a 8% mortgage. We want to demyth the process and how you can look at it, demystify, I should say, and look at it a bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens is we tend to say, if this happens, then this happens. And I want to say that the what happens gets to be so much broader than that. There are so many more options. And if we stop being myopically focused on the herd mentality and what everyone else is doing, we can start to see the other possibilities. I think I'm sure I've talked about this before. My experience was, if you're in your 40s, like I was at the time and still am, I'll say, and you have a family and you live in a fairly affluent town, you own your house. That is the status quo. And it wasn't until I started surrounding myself with very successful entrepreneurs and learned that they had different ways of choosing how and where to live. And it opened my mind to say, why do I think that I have to own my house? Why do I think that that's the best way just because maybe that's what we hear when we're younger and everyone says buy a home as soon as you can, which, yes, there are a lot of use cases and reasons why that's good. However, when we open our mind to see a different way and we get curious, and curiosity, I really think is the key here, all of a sudden, whole new worlds open up.
Mm-hmm.
And I really got clear that I was ready to move out of my last home. Let's just say, like, there was nothing majorly wrong with it. My energy was just aligning with something different. I wanted something different. And I started to get really clear on what that was. So I was open then to selling my home. And what do you know? I didn't even put it on the market. Somebody said, "Oh, I'd like to buy your home." Well, wow. Okay. Why did that happen? Because I was so open to the possibilities, and I'm renting now, right? And so there are other ways to live your life. And I
Absolutely.
love renting now. It's like it's really it's allowed a domino effect of other things to unfold, especially in my real estate investing, that I could never have predicted or made happen with such ease.
Right.
So
And so you're still a real estate owner. You're just owning it in a different capacity than is the status quo. You actually own more real estate now, right? Now that you've sold your primary home, you probably own more, you do own more real estate now than you did then, and you're profiting from it, and you're using it to, and you're living in a space that makes you really happy. Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All of that is true. All
Yeah.
of that is true. And I think a lot of real estate investors, or some real estate investors, get that and live that way. And I think it's not limited to real estate investing, though. And especially for people that are living in big houses, or, houses worth a good amount of money. Let's say in our area, right? I think the average house price, you probably know it more than I do right now. It's probably in the 900,000s,
Over a million. Yeah.
over a million.
Yeah.
So you have $1 million house and you've been in it for a while. You've got a good amount of equity because there's been a lot of appreciation. Well, I want to say there's actually an opportunity cost to not using the equity in that house to invest in something else. And that doesn't necessarily have to be real estate, but the continued appreciation that we've seen over the last 5, 10 years, 20 years is not necessarily going to grow. And it's not necessarily going to grow, and maybe it will continue to grow for sure. I don't know that it's going to grow at the same rate. We don't know that. And by the way, even if it did, I think you have to ask yourself, what are you settling for in order to stay quote unquote safe?
Yeah,
that is limiting you to seeing the possibilities of what could be.
right. Exactly. We hear that people are trying to sort of like, well, I'm going to wait to interest rates come down, or I'm going to wait to prices come down, or I'm going to wait to see what happens in the election, or I'm going to wait. And what my experience has been is that when things shift, they shift quickly. So what we do know is that we've seen the appreciation in the market. We know that. That's a fact. That's a fact. We know that inventory is at historic lows. That's a fact. When we know that when inventory is low is when you get the biggest amount of return when you sell. So those are all facts. What we don't know is what's going to happen with an election and what's going to, so let's base decisions on two things. One, the facts that today, if you sell your home, you're sitting in a place where you, because of all of those facts, you're going to do well.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, what's important to you? What
Right.
is it that you want to do with your one wild and precious life? Do you know? Because if you're sitting there saying, well, I'd like to, boy, I'd love to have a home on the Cape, or boy, I'd love to have a place down in Naples, or geez, wouldn't it be fun to live in Arizona for 6 months out of the year, or travel, or whatever those big dreams are. Why not, dig into that a little bit more and say, how can I make that possible? Because what I was saying earlier is the pendulum shifts from side to side, from being a buyer's market to being a seller's market. Now, those shifts ultimately take a long time, but boy, when it shifts fast because of the herd mentality. All of a
Mm.
sudden, you see your neighbors or everybody's selling their house. You put your house on the market, but guess what? You now have competition, which means you're not going to get as much of a price tag for it because buyers, when there's more inventory, prices come down. It's a fact.
Right.
So right now, we know the environment is conducive to selling for premium. We know that because inventory is so low. We have all of these people that want to buy real estate, which makes a lot of sense. It makes a ton of sense. So why not say, okay, I know the environment is great today. I know that I have this yearning to do to be able to maybe have another home where my kids can gather to go skiing or to go to the beach or a lake or whatever that might be. Well, let's figure out how you can get there because um, you really want to be driven by the facts of the matter and what is it that's important to you.
Exactly, exactly. You want to be in charge of your life and not reactive to events outside of it.
Yeah.
I really feel like we have no, we can make predictions about what's coming, we can have inclinations about what's coming, and we never really know. If you think about big events that have changed history, nobody knew that they were coming. Nobody knew
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, a few people maybe knew that the crash in 2008 was coming, right? The insiders knew.
Mm-hmm.
And people speculated. No one knew 9/11 was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
No one knew, there's a lot of fear around war right now. And it could be quelled and it could escalate and it could
Yep.
mean a lot of things. And so
If
the
you think
way,
about that, sorry to interrupt, but you think about that with even COVID, right? Nobody knew COVID was coming. And then look at what COVID did to the housing market. It lit a match under the housing market, which at first it was so fearful. I remember being on calls with my team and everybody was so afraid about what that was going to do to the real estate market. And then boom, look what it did to it. It was not predictable and the market went through the roof. So yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry
I
to
love
interrupt,
that
but I think
example.
that's, it's just a great example of you can't you can't predict anything. And then once something happens, you also can't predict what the reaction's going to be. And we're 10 months away from an election, and the fact that there's already people speculating about how it's going to affect the real estate market and boy, I think I should just wait to see what happens is just it's just a real a waste of your energy.
I don't, yeah, and exactly like, and how could it drastically, like right away, when we researched what happens after an
Mhm.
election, things don't change drastically.
No.
So it's not as if someone is going to get elected into office and the market is going to turn. Very unlikely. Now, is there potentially some more volatility? Yeah, maybe. But I would ask you, do you want to live your life now? And like what if maybe we all won't be here five, I mean, not to be doom and gloom, but what if we all aren't here in 5 years?
Mm,
How do you want to spend that time? Do you want to spend it in a place that you really love and, really enjoy it? Or do you want to put up with your current situation
mm. Yeah.
because
It's
you
crazy. We
it's
hear
so
that
much
so much,
safer?
right, Christine? Like we hear people saying, I'm in a very unhappy marriage and I don't love where I live, but I have to wait, 4 years I'm going to live this way for the next 4 years until my kid graduates from high school or whatever. I mean, we've had people tell us these stories like,
Yeah.
that's a long time.
4 years is a
That's,
long time, and it's
yeah,
going to affect your energy for 4 years. Do
it's
you
going to,
realize it's almost 1,500 days? Like
yeah.
that is a long time, and you're going to be it's the opportunity cost again. What are you not doing because you are putting up with, tolerating, sacrificing for this? And by the way, like it's not all cut and dry. It's not that you don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. If you're staying in a place because you think it's going to appreciate or the interest rates are too high, well, you never know what's going to come into your town and change the valuations for better or for worse. So
Mm,
we, there's, the only constant is that things will continue to change.
yep. Yep.
So what feels really good to you? And also, a lot of people we see have a lot of equity, have a lot of retirement savings, and forget that they're sitting on a big cushion. And I don't mean to minimize the fact that this has taken a lot, that work to build up, and that we should be, not careful with our money. Yet the mentality of just stowing it away and saving it and sitting on it is not the way that money's meant to work. It's meant to flow, and healthy economies have money flowing throughout them. Think of your household as a mini economy.
Hmm.
When you're stuffing it, like it's kind of like you're cutting off the flow, and the flow is what, like, think about work. You want to work in flow. Like flow is a natural state. It's in nature, and you definitely don't want to just keep it under a mattress, so to speak,
Stifle it.
or stifle it. That's the word. Thank you. Yeah, and it's really, your life is going to feel stifled when you take the energy of money and stifle it. Everything else in your life is going to feel a little bit stifled too. It's just like staying in a relationship that is over. You like I completely, I'm not an expert on this topic. I
Mhm.
will say though, people say, "Oh, I do it for the kids." Well, do you think the kids do not notice that you are stifled because you're with a partner that is not feeding your soul, or that feeling good or aligned for you? No, they are going to feel that impact, right? So
Mhm.
how are you going to, what are your choices? There's always so, like, infinite choices. There's so
Yeah,
many.
absolutely. And the same thing goes with careers. And I know in your line of work with coaching and just in what we're doing and having the abundant investor, we just get to hear a lot of stories from people. And you hear people saying, well, I'm just going to, you know, wait it out for the next 4 or 5 years. Well, I can't do that because I have a contract and I'm going to just wait that contract out. There's going to be other options. There's always other options. There's always other options. And I think that the topic of this, podcast around real estate, we really wanted to dive into it at this time of year when people are sort of thinking about their goals for 2024, thinking about what they want to accomplish. And we want to be a voice to kind of drown out the negative, like, oh, there's going to be an election, don't move, or oh, interest rates, are too high, or all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. We want to be a voice to say, no, 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 no. Let's flip that on its head, and let's start with, what do you want to do?
Yeah,
Because there's
exactly.
always, even though there's fewer sales, there are sales happening. Why wouldn't you be part of that if that's what you want
Exactly.
to do?
Yeah, you just
Yep.
had a really beautiful sale yesterday, and I want to also say that your buyers got the house they bought for under asking, not over asking, like a lot of
Yeah.
houses today, people think, oh, I'm going to be in a bidding war. I'm going to have to go over asking. Well, not necessarily. I
No.
was, one of the conversations we had earlier was talking about what's on the market right now. And with an investor mentality, you can see things that have been sitting for more than 2 weeks and get excited. And I see some interesting opportunities right now. And you never know what the seller, from a buyer's perspective, you never know what the seller's got going on, and maybe there's a reason why that house is not selling, right? And for a seller, if you are doing the work, if you follow everything in our seller's guide, there are people that are hungry to buy, especially like turnkey houses right now. So
Absolutely.
there's opportunity on both sides, and we can help you. You've got so much experience with real estate, Beth, and know this so well in terms of guiding people to pricing and timing and all of that. Staging, like your house is beautiful, all of that. So helping people take advantage of whatever market we're in, and being able to see the opportunity, I think, is a big gift that you give to the people that you're working with. And as I get into the agent world as well, I'm excited for that too, and to bring this coaching mentality we both have to the table too, whether you're buying your next house or an investment. And speaking of investment, I think it's a really fun time to think about real estate investing, because you can use some of that equity. Or maybe you don't want to move at this moment because you're happy in your home and your kids are in school in your community or whatever reason. There are some really interesting opportunities and places we were just looking at some charts where there is some more inventory in some places rather than others. So if you're really squeezed, and our town feels a bit like that right now, you might look outside of the town for opportunities. That's what we're doing. We're looking out of state and are finding things, and finding an area where the average price of a home is quite a bit less, and there's good reasons to invest there.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes a ton of sense. It makes a ton of sense. And I think of, even in this competitive market, to your point, I just had a buyer that got a property significantly under asking. And they're willing to do the work, and they're going to have a beautiful home. And so you just have to, maybe just think a little bit differently than, as like we keep saying, everybody else.
Yes.
Everybody else is looking for a turnkey home for under X amount.
Yeah.
Well, maybe be willing to look at a house that needs a little refresh.
Well, TLC.
And that's been
Yeah.
on the market for a couple of weeks. And and I think that, my buyers had a great attitude towards that. And that's really, that mindset is so key and so important. It's easy to throw your hands up and say, well, I can't find a house, or, it's also easy to say, yeah, there's a house out there for me. Let me go find it.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. I was just going to say, you will find what you're seeking when you start to declare what you want. You're going to see it. It's like, if everyone just like looks around the room for a second and like look at anything brown that you see, right? Like look for anything that's brown. Okay, now close your eyes and tell me where there's red. You don't know. You don't know where any red is because you were only looking for brown. But you found the brown. And it's just like when you go buy a new Tesla, all of a sudden you see all the other Teslas on the road, like a lot more, or you buy a Toyota Highlander, all of a sudden they're everywhere. Why? Because that's where your focus is. So you set your focus on finding the type of house and the house that you really want, you're going to find it.
You got it.
We're going to help you find it and help you negotiate. Like, I think another reason why that deal was so great that just you closed yesterday was your great negotiation and guidance.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. It's, there's the possibilities are endless. And I love that. It's, what you seek, you will find in all aspects of your life. So, Leo, and another point you made earlier that I just want to touch on is life is meant to be enjoyed. We're on this earth to enjoy life, not to suffer,
Yes.
So, as we head into 2024, the question is, what do you want to do to enjoy your life more? And if there's something that's causing suffering, maybe dig into that a little bit and say, this is not something that needs to be, and maybe turn down the news a little bit and drown out the negative, because it's such a election years, just people can get so consumed with it. And that's my piece of advice for today.
Love it. So good. So good. This is great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another episode. We're here every week, and you can find all of our information, our website, our social media channels, our growing Instagram and our TikTok. They're in the show notes, and we hope that you'll follow along. Daily information, inspiration, and news on what's happening here.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Abundant Investor Podcast and learned something new. We would love to hear from you. And if you did get something from this episode, please subscribe and rate this podcast so more people can find it and live their rich lives too. And remember, an abundant mindset means there's always plenty to go around, and through giving, we receive.